Just waiting. I was waiting. Thank you, parrots. Just was waiting for people to log on. I guess people thought we're starting later. Okay, so let's just get right to it. Okay, again, we're learning Lula Nishmas, Yehuda Shimon, Zechron Baruch ben Yeshua Yosef Moshe, and Aryeh Zechron Baruch ben Yeshua Adam Zalman Neshama Shav and Aliyah. And we should only hear Besudas Tovas. Okay, so continuing, so we're discussing Refua. So tonight, last week was more of a background, and tonight we'll get into the real. We'll start with all the common examples and scenarios of what goes on with all the common shilas that go on with Hilchos Refua, these type of shilas. But again, just to review, we are not talking about somebody whose life is in danger. If somebody's life is in danger, obviously you do whatever it is that you need to do. And if somebody is a serious chayla she'ein by sakana, right? Somebody who's a chayla that doesn't have a sakana, but they're a legitimate chayla, and that would be somebody who has a virus, an infection, strep throat, you name it, any type of serious fevers, that's a real chayla, and there's no isser of doing refuah for them, right? And that, not only that, there's no isser refuah. You could even ask a guy to go to the pharmacy for you, etc., etc. Those are all allowed, right? But the issue that we're dealing with is for a chayla that is what we call a meichush ba'alma. It's a chayla who's well, but not well. They're just not feeling well. And that the Chachamim made a takana d'Rabbanon, that you're not allowed to do any sort of healing because you may come to grind medications. And since you may come to grind medications, which is an Issa Daraisa, so the Chachamim said there will be no refuah, because since refuah is so important to people, so therefore they made a takana of that you might come to grind medication. So you may ask, nowadays nobody's grinding medication. If you're going to take an Advil, nobody is going to grind the medication because you're taking an Advil. So the basic answer to that question is that it's a takanas chachamim, and once the chachamim make a takana, we don't go back on that takana. Much of Hilchos Shabbos, it goes onto that category, and therefore, once you're not allowed to, so then you're not allowed to, and it stays with us. There are some shitas that do say that nowadays there is more leniency, there's more room for leniency, since bottom line is we don't grind. So even though we still have the gezeira of refuah, but since nobody grinds medications, so in certain scenarios we will say that nowadays that nobody grinds. So then that we would rely on that leniency. Okay, yes, medicines are ground already, and we'll see exactly why that's actually does make it more makel, but that medicines are ground already. But again, it doesn't make a difference because there's a takana is a takana, right? So I hope that is clear. Again, once a chacham make a takana, then that takana sticks with us, right? That's with bishalakum, right? You're not allowed to have a non-Jew cook for you. Many may say, well, I'm not going to have somebody in my house and a non-Jew in my house cooking. That doesn't mean I'm going to marry their daughter, right? But that's the takana is a takana. We don't backtrack. Chol Yisrael is another one, right? We know that the milk, nobody thinks that there's pig's milk that's going on, that anybody thinks that they're consuming pig's milk, right? But once a chacham made a takana that a yid has to see the milkings, and then it sticks with us. So those are a couple of examples, and this is also one of them. So the takana sticks with us, even though pills are ground already, and even though nobody grinds medications anymore. But that's the takana, and that's what sticks with us. So again, the takana is only meant for somebody who's, let's call it quasi sick or quasi not feeling well, not for somebody who is really sick. Somebody who's really sick, the Chacham said they're allowed to do any sort of Refua. That's fine. Now, whether if that Refua involves a Melacha, then you have to ask a Shaila and figure out if it's allowed or not, and if it's better to ask a guy to do it, etc., etc. Right? But the bottom line is again, let's make it clear. When somebody is sick, legitimately sick, then there is no Isser of Refua. And we said last week, I think we said last week, if we didn't, let's just review it. Legitimately sick is fever. Even a low-grade fever is considered legitimately sick. Children under the age of 6, 7 years old are considered sick for anything, right? If a kid needs something, a kid can't sleep, that would be considered sick, right? If a kid has falls and cuts themselves, whatever it is, a kid has a little bit of headache or whatever, any type of thing like that, there's no such thing. There's no takana of refuah, again, because they're considered like sick, chayla she'ein ba sakana. There would also, I would say, I can't give a specific age, but there's a certain age where after, let's say 80 years old, 85 years old, 90, whatever, there's a certain age where the elderly would already be considered sick, and they're always sick because they're never feeling well. So therefore, they would also be able to do any sort of refuahs. Okay, so, but now that we got down to it, let's go through some of the examples. So, an example of somebody who is meichush ba'alma, quasi sick, would be a toothache. Now, obviously, okay, let's just go through examples first. Toothache, sore throat, headache, sneezing and coughing, a cold, any of these type of things, those would be considered meichush ba'alma, quasi sick, right? So now for those people, the Chachamim said that there's two of them that would not be required. There's two scenarios where you would not have the takana of refuah, and that is if it's bothering your entire body, right? And meaning the way it seems to be understood by the poskim is that if you cannot function because of the pain, meaning you can have a toothache, right? Somebody has a toothache. So there's toothaches and then there's toothaches. You're gonna have a toothache that's bothering you, but you're functioning fine. Then you can have a toothache where you'll go to shul, let's say, or you'll stay by the Shabbos meal, but it's just throbbing pain that you can't stop thinking about. So that if it's that painful, then that would be considered a chayla, and then you would be able to do refuah. It's only the annoying toothache that's what would be more of a problem. Or if you're so not feeling well that you would lay down in bed, then that's also considered a chayla she'ein ba sakana, even if you're really not considered a chayla. But if it's bothering you enough that you want to go to lay down in bed, then that would also tell you that there is no isser. This takana of the chachamim that you're not allowed to take refuah would not apply. So again, those are the two that we have to keep in mind. If it's bothering you enough that, I guess to use a term that we use nowadays, it's annoying, right? Then that's not if it's annoying, that's not enough to allow you to take medications, but it has to be, I don't know what to say, really annoying, but it has to be throbbing, and basically you can't stop thinking about it, then that would be enough for you to take medication, or if you would lay down. Doesn't mean you have to actually lay down, but if you theoretically would lay down, then you would be allowed to take any sort of medication. So we're talking about somewhere in the middle, right? Yeah, so, and for this case, in this scenario, you would not be able to ask a guy. You would not be able to ask a guy to do anything for you because you're not really sick. It's this quasi sick and meichush ba'alma. Okay. So now, what type of healing did the Chachamim say you can't do? And here's where it gets a little bit confusing, because we think that only medications that you'd grind up, right? What about stretching? Or like somebody has pain in their leg, so they want to stretch their leg. Are they allowed to do that? So that's also Refua, and that would not be allowed. Creams, oils, powders, anything like that that's meant to heal, and it's just something annoying, then that's all considered part of the takana. So exercise is a problem, physical therapy would be a problem, but we'll get to some scenarios where physical therapy would work. Massage could be a problem. Soaking something in water could be a problem, right? So those are, I think, the basic examples. If anybody has any questions about any other particular examples, then please post it. But those are basically the things that the Chachamim said you're not allowed to do, because it all falls under the umbrella of Refua. Okay, so now, but there is a way out. There's a few ways out where somebody who's having these problems can take medication on Shabbos. The simplest way to do it would be if you do it in a way that healthy people would do it. For example, somebody has a toothache. Again, it's annoying, but nothing more than that. But they want to take medication, so that's a problem. To take medication is a problem. But what about taking some vodka or bourbon or whatever, scotch, whatever it is that you can take, and you put it into the mouth? And since there's alcohol, usually like 40% alcohol in it, then that numbs it. So that would be allowed, since that it doesn't look like you're taking medication. It looks like you're drinking schnapps, which people do. So since enough people drink schnapps, therefore you would be able to drink the schnapps. You would be able to spit it out. You can spit it out, because when you take the medication, when you take the alcohol, you look no different than a normal, what we call is Michael Briam. It's the food for healthy people. I'm not saying that it's a healthy thing to drink alcohol. That's a different schmooze for a different time. But it's a relatively normal thing to do. So therefore, that would not be considered refuah, even though your entire intention of doing the alcohol is for therapeutic purposes, right? Drinking a tea for a sore throat is also, meaning you would not be having this tea if you didn't have a sore throat. You're still allowed to do it, because that's called Michael Briam. People see you, not that this has to do with people seeing you. It's not a Maras Ayin situation. It's just if you yourself are seeing that you're gonna take a tea, that's not gonna make you go grind a medication, because you're just drinking a tea. That's the way people that's the way normal people do things on Shabbos. So even though you're doing it strictly for your sore throat, it's not a problem. Okay, prune juice for laxative, that would also be okay, even though I imagine many people don't normally drink prune juice. But since there's enough people that drink prune juice, so taking prune juice for laxative would be fine, right? And also something, if you're nervous and you know that you eat a certain food or have a certain type of drink would calm down your nerves, or alcohol for that purpose, right? So that would also be okay, even though you're doing it for refuah purposes, since it's not meant, it doesn't look like you're doing it for refuah and for healing. It looks like you're just drinking it as a normal person, so therefore you're okay. That's one way of doing it. Now, there is a kula, because this shaila comes up a lot, is can you put on oil on the skin, on chapped skin, or oil on chapped lips on Shabbos? And nowadays, for sure, well, today's beautiful weather, I don't think it was so nageya, but when it's very cold, people lick their lips and then they come home and they want to put on medication. So many people who are healthy put on, I don't know if it works for oil. Maybe somebody could say, if somebody wants to text or whatever, post whether that's a normal thing to put on oil. Certainly lip balm and that type of thing is a normal thing that healthy people put on during the winter, or those that go to Florida and get sunburned or whatever it is, and it's a normal thing people put on. So therefore, if many persons can say, since regular people put that on, you would be able, if chapped hands are bothering you, that's something that looks like what regular healthy people do. Now, I don't know oil. I'm not so sure people put oil on their hands on a steady basis. Certainly lotions after a shower, right? Many people will put on the skin gets dry, so many people put that on a regular basis, even though it's not for healing purposes. It's just there to make the skin feel good. So therefore, that would be allowed on Shabbos because that's what normal people do. But again, let's just, I think we said it last week, just let's make sure that everybody's aware of this. I mean, and I think most are. Chapstick or any solid stick, if you use that on Shabbos, it could be an Issa D'Oraisa. Anything that's a stick that's being broken down, for example, deodorant stick would be the most common example. Deodorant stick is a problem with D'Oraisa. You have to use deodorant spray or a roll-on. A roll-on is different than a stick. A roll-on is just a ball. There's nothing breaking down. There's liquid inside the bottle, and the roll-on goes with it. Right, just pulls out the liquid. But a stick could be a real problem. So using chapstick or any company that has that type of thing is a problem on Shabbos. So we're talking about if you had some sort of liquid that you normally put on, and people would put it on a regular basis, then that would be able to be put on. Now lotions have to be liquidy enough that they would pour. If they're not, then there's a malacha. Again, when we're referring to Refua here, we're referring to things that are not malacha, that the Chacham said you're still not allowed to do because we're afraid you're going to grind. But malacha is certainly not allowed. Malacha is certainly not allowed to be done for these things because it's not a chayla sheyesh b'sakana, right? So again, if you have a liquid cream that's liquidy enough that it would actually pour, which from my understanding, almost no creams are liquidy enough for that, but maybe you could water it down before Shabbos. Again, I don't know exactly how these things work, but it's if it's not thick, then you would be able to put it on Shabbos because that's what normal people do. Okay, but again, I think it doesn't apply as far as I know to most lotions because they're too thick. Okay, that's one way. Another way would be to take the medication and put it into the food before Shabbos. For example, if you know that you need Advil, and you're not sure if you're gonna have a big enough headache, so you can melt it down into a drink, or you could put it, let's say, into cake. And then you eat the cake, you put it in before Shabbos, preferably. Some say you can even put it in on Shabbos, but you put it into the food before Shabbos, and then you eat the food like normal on Shabbos, and then that is not called food. That's another way to do it. Okay. Yeah, so that's another eitzah, but a lot of times people are not forward thinking enough to be able to do this. Okay, so now getting back to those are the two eitzahs again for getting out of the Refua. You could either do a Refua that would be normal for people to do, or you could put the medication, mix it in before Shabbos, and then it's 100% lechatchila to use that. Okay. Now getting back to the chapped skins and lips. So again, if it's something that normal people would do, then that would be fine. If not, so then you have to know. So somebody really has chapped lips. So I don't even know what the options are exactly out there because we said already you can't use chapstick on Shabbos, right? So what are you going to use? I don't know. So it seems like oil might help. So then you have to figure out how bad do the lips hurt. If the lips really hurt, that you're either going to go lay down, or it's really bothering you that you can't function, so then that would be a problem that would be no problem, and you're allowed to put it onto the lips. If it's just annoying, then you would not be allowed to put the oil on the lips, because I think that's not what normal people do. They might put on lotions and stuff, but they don't put on oil. If you say that people do put on oil and that's a normal thing for people to do, then okay, then fine. So then that would be allowed to. That's one eitzah. I mean, whatever. That would be the halacha. Another eitzah, which I don't know if this works for the lips, but it certainly would work for chapped hands. So what you do is you take the lotion, and this, again, if it's a very thick lotion, it's not going to work because it's not going to move. But if it's a lotion that's thin enough that it'll eventually make its way down to the hand. So basically what you can do is you can put let's say this is the part of the hand, like, there's two ways to do it. Let's say this is the part of the hand that's chapped, and here there's no problem. So what you can do is you can put the lotion here, because this is healthy. There's nothing sick about it. There's nothing bothering you with this part. So what you do is you can put the lotion here, and then let it roll down to here. And if by then it gets thin enough, then you could spread it out, right? But if not, you could just put the lotion there. Again, I don't know how practical this is. I've never tried it myself. But you can, again, put the lotion here and then let it, because here it would be mutter to put it because there's nothing unhealthy. There's no Refua here, right? You let it roll down to here, and then you turn your hand over and let it sit there, and then you would, then hopefully that will heal it. So again, so what you do is you put the lotion on the healthy part of the skin, and then let it roll down to the unhealthy part, and that would be okay. All right? But again, if the chapped hands are bothering you to the extent that you can't function, which some people do have terribly chapped hands, and they really they can't function, so then you would be able to put on, again, it would have to be a lotion that would be very, very thin, and that you'd be able to smear it. And if it's thick, then since it's a malacha, you wouldn't be able to do it. Okay? But there is a kula from the Magen Avram, and it's worthwhile to know this leniency. It's a major, major leniency. And that is, he says that you can take a cream that's very thick, which is normally also to do on Shabbos. But he says that if you move the skin, I don't know what the term is, if you rub the skin, shouldn't be that big a word, I should be able to remember that, right? If you rub the skin, if you rub the cream into the skin very well, so that there is no longer any cream visible on the skin, meaning it gets rubbed in and it totally gets absorbed into the skin, the Magen Avraham says that there's no isser of smearing in that scenario, and it would be mutter to do that. The question is, do we paskin like this? Again, this is a big leniency, and we don't really paskin like it unless very necessary. If it's very necessary, then you can rely on this. Okay? So again, what his leniency is, you could take a thick cream, as thick as you want. It could even be a Vaseline, which is extremely thick. And you rub it in, but you got to keep rubbing it until it disappears, until it goes into the skin. I'm assuming that if you can still see a shine on the skin, that's still considered rubbed in, meaning you can't see any actual physical cream there, then that would be 100% mutter according to the Magen Avraham, and we would rely on this in a desperate situation. So if you have a child, let's jump to rashes, because since it's along the same lines, right? So if you have a child who has a diaper rash, or somebody has a rash and they're really, really in pain, and you want to, we'll get to what the best way to do it is, but if you can't do it in the best way, so if you rub it in until that cream disappears, there the Magen Avraham would say that that's okay. Okay, so that's a good leniency to know. Now, I'm not so sure if chapped hands would ever be that painful and that would be such a problem, but it can happen for arthritis. Many people who that have arthritis in their hands, especially when it can get cold or it rains and they feel it in their bones and they can be going crazy from the pain, and rubbing in this cream would help. So if they're really, really in pain, so what you would do is rub in the cream and to the extent that it disappears, and then you'd be okay. So how do you rub it in so well on a baby's diaper rash? I don't know. I don't know if it's even I don't even know if it's feasible. You'd have to know which type of cream. Yes, from my days of changing diapers, I haven't had that in a while. But I don't know if you can take diaper rash cream and rub it in till it disappears. So you'd have to, I don't know, you'd maybe have to find a thinner cream. But okay, so once we're on rashes, let's discuss how to put something on rash or a burn, etc., because it's a very, very common question. Okay, so thick cream. First of all, there's one. Let's get rid of one big misunderstanding that many people have. There is nothing. Yeah, so somebody's saying that if you so you probably can't rub and rub it. You can have somebody else do it. You can have somebody else do it to do it for you, right? But so the first thing with a rash, so that was saying that many people think that any cream that's in a tube, right? Any cream that's in a tube, you're not allowed to squeeze. That's called squeezing, meaning you have, because people think of toothpaste, so you shouldn't brush your teeth. So therefore, they think that the problem is squeezing the toothpaste out of the tube, or Desitin, or whatever creams you have for a rash. Squeezing out of the tube is a form of squeezing. That is not the case. Okay, squeezing out of the tube is not the issue. It's smearing is the issue. So when you have diaper rash cream that's in a tube, there's no problem with squeezing the cream out of the tube. The problem is smearing the cream once you get it out of the tube. Okay? Dabbing cream is really not allowed according to most poskim. That's from the Rabbanon. So meaning you take the cream out of the tube and then to take it, put it on your finger and dab it. So many say that the Rabbanon say that that's no good because that could very well lead to you smearing it, which I mean, we could imagine that can I mean, all you need to do is move it a little bit and then it's already smearing. So many say the dab on cream you shouldn't do either. But to dab on cream with a shinoi, that's allowed. To do it some differently than what you normally do is allowed. So yes, like somebody just posted here. So you can squeeze the cream out of the tube and just put it onto the diaper, or even put it onto the skin. And because it depends how you normally do it, and then you close the diaper, and then the baby's movements will move the cream around. That's perfectly fine. But if you're taking the cream out of a tub, so the best way to do it is to dab it onto the body or to the diaper with a shinui. Meaning, so some say take it with the back of a spoon. Right? You can take it with the front of a spoon too, whichever way you want, and then you put it onto the skin that way. So that would be a shinui. Or you could take it with a different finger that you don't normally use, and then that's even, and again, you can't smear it unless you go with the leniency that we said before. But assuming that you're not going with that leniency, because it usually suffices, you don't really need to go for that leniency, at least for baby rashes. So you just take the cream and you take it out of the tub either with a different finger or with the back of a spoon, and then you can either put it onto the body or onto the diaper, and then you close the diaper, and then the baby's movements will automatically spread out the cream, and that's going to be fine, right? But the same thing goes for gauze pads. Somebody has a burn or something like that. So the best way to put the cream on would be to put the cream onto a gauze pad, and then put the gauze pad onto the burn, and then you'd be okay, even if the movement of the adult, you put it on with the adult, you put it on, even though it's an adult moving it, that would still be okay. If you're putting tape onto the gauze pad on the burn, then you should make sure to cut the tape before Shabbos, because cutting tape could be an issue. But we'll get to that when we get to cuts. If the baby's in pain with the rash, you should still put it on with a shinui, because I don't see why putting it on regularly is going to make the baby feel any better than if you put it on with a shinui. Right? I would think I would think that what does the baby care how you put the cream on? The baby just wants the cream, right? And that should be enough to do it with a shino. Again, we're concerned of you smearing the cream on. So obviously, if you have a non-Jew, the non-Jew can put the cream on in any way that they want, right? So that's basically. Now again, if it's an infection, if you're talking about an infection, so any infection on a baby, and you're afraid that if you don't put it on properly, then it won't be administered normally, then yes, 100%, you wouldn't have to use a shine. You can do it as normal, right? But if it's anything less than an infection, then you should do it as right. Do it with a shine. Okay. Fine. So again, let's just review with how to do a rash. The best way to do a rash is to squeeze it out of the tube and put it onto the diaper or to the skin. Close up the diaper, and then the baby's movement will work automatically that way. Or what you can do is take it out of a tub and dab it on, and then it'll get moved around that way. And worst comes to worst, if it's really bad, then you can do it even without a shinoi, and then you have the last kula, which is the Magen Avram, which is that if you can smear in the cream until it totally disappears, then that would be okay. Okay, I think any questions on rash? I don't know why I think I'm missing something. About rashes, I don't know if anybody has any questions about the rash. Okay, let me see. Hold on a second, I just lost the chat. Okay, if the child is complaining about chapped skin around their mouth, nose, can the child put moisturizer on? If it's a young child under the age of 6 or 7, for sure. If it's a child that's older and it's really bothering them, so what the best way to do it would be to dab on the moisturizer. That would be the best way to do it. Just tell them to dab it on. Like I would say, put it on the back of the finger and put it on like that. If you're saying the mouth, nose, just put it on like this, and then they should be they should be okay. All right. I keep losing the chat here. Okay, another question. If the rash is due to allergic reaction. So if it's a child, if we're talking about it under the age of 6, so anything under the age 6, 7 is considered a chayla. So then medication is allowed. If it's a rash is an allergic reaction for somebody older. So if it's an allergic reaction that you're familiar with and you're not sure what's going on with it, meaning you are sure that, meaning you're familiar with this, and you know that the person will know 100% will be okay. It'll just be a little bit bothersome. So then you shouldn't do anything. But if you know that this, or the doctor warned you that this allergic reaction can potentially get you to really not feel well, then you 100% can take any sort of medication. Okay. So now on the same subject, popping pimples. Common question that gets asked is, can you pop a pimple on Shabbos? So first thing we have to figure out, is that Refua? Is that healing? Is popping a pimple considered a healing? So the person can say that that's not healing, right? Because it's not, all you're doing is taking away pain. You're not actually, by popping a pimple, as far as I know, I'm no dermatologist, but from the way I understand it, is that when you pop a pimple, that's not healing. That's just the pressure. It bothers you, or the look bothers you, but there's really no healing going on whatsoever. So you would be allowed to pop the pimple, right? Now you say it may bleed. So if you know 100% it's going to bleed, then you can't pop the pimple. If you're not sure it's going to bleed, and most of the time it doesn't bleed, just pus comes out, then you are allowed to pop the pimple, right? Because again, that's not Refua. It's just taking care of some pressure, right? Okay, so if it's somebody just texted, if it's posted, if it's a pimple that can be MRSA, and then it's an infection, then for sure you can, and you're concerned that it might be an infection. He's saying whether that's Refua. So if it's an infection, then we said already infection could be considered chayla sheyesh basakana, can certainly be considered a legitimate chayla, and then that would be, Refua would be allowed, right? So taking out a splinter also would be mutter. It's 100% mutter to take out a splinter on Shabbos. And you could even use the tweezers, even though tweezers is muksa, but if you need the tweezers, it's a klisha malachta le'isr. It's a utensil that's normally used for isr, but here you're using it for heter. So therefore, it would be okay even to use a splinter. Now, another common question is suntan lotion. Can you put on suntan lotion? So lotion, we said, is smearing. That's a problem. What about the suntan spray? That is not Refua. All you're doing is putting on the spray in order to make sure you don't get burned. That's not considered healing. Since it's not considered healing, therefore you are allowed to put on suntan spray, and that's 100%. That's 100% mutter. But again, it's only the spray. Suntan spray is mutter, not suntan lotion, because suntan lotion, unless it's very thin suntan lotion that would pour meaning it has to pour easily, which as far as I know, suntan lotions don't pour so easily, so that you wouldn't be allowed to do. But the suntan sprays you would be allowed to do, and you'd even be allowed to spread it, because from what I understand, these suntan sprays come out very liquidy. So once it's liquidy, then you can spread it out on the skin. Now, are you allowed to tan on Shabbos? I know that's not really the subject of this shir. Are you allowed to tan on Shabbos? The answer is most places can say you are not allowed to purposely tan on Shabbos, because that's like dyeing the skin. So, but if you want to take a walk on Shabbos and you know you're going to end up getting a tan, that's for sure okay, because your kavanah is not to get the tan, right? Your kavanah is to walk, so therefore it's considered an unintended consequence, and it's not going to definitely happen that you're going to get tan, so that will be okay. And sitting outside is also okay, even though you know you're going to get tanned, that's fine. Now, sitting outside in a lounge chair the same exact way you would do it during the week, in a bathing suit or something like that, I would say that is not proper to do. Probably not for. It's not covered Shabbos. It's not covered Shabbos either, right? It's not covered Shabbos, but it would be. But if you're just sitting outside and you know you're going to get tan, then that's fine. So again, suntan lotion is not allowed because of it's too thick. Suntan spray is allowed, and again, the reason why it's not Refua is because you're not healing anything. It's preventative. It's to make sure that somebody doesn't get a sunburn. So therefore it's okay. Preventative is a whole different subject, but it's an important subject because it comes up a lot, but it's a little late now, so we'll stop with that. So again, just to review, when you have a chayla, somebody who's sick, but it's just annoying, then that's where the Rabbanan said you're not allowed to do healing. So that's the problem. The middle, meaning somebody who's feeling perfectly fine, would be okay, like doing the suntan lotion. That's fine because you're not sick. So you're just putting it on again, not lotion, but suntan spray. Somebody who's really sick, meaning they want to lay down, also doesn't have any problem with Refua. It's the middle person who's annoyed. That's the one that has the problem with Refua. And you can basically, again, you can put the medicine into a food from before Shabbos, and then you could take it on Shabbos with no problem. And if it's something that healthy people would do, then it's also not a problem. So, for example, we said taking alcohol in order to take care of a toothache or a canker sore or anything like that would be mutter, not alcohol, rubbing alcohol, meaning drinking alcohol like vodka or something like that. That would be mutter to take on Shabbos because that's what healthy people do. Taking a tea for a sore throat, for a cold, chicken soup for a cold, would be also mutter, because that's what we call ma'chabriyim. And we said that if you have a lotion that's thin enough to put on chapped hands, chapped skin, chapped lips, and that's something that normal people would put on, and they don't just put it on for healing purposes, then that would be allowed too. Okay, I think that's about it. I wish everybody a good tvach, and then next week we will continue on this subject as Hashem. Okay, good tvach.
So you're having a child, so one day.